Yes, there certainly is a very strong contingent of American academic leadership and policy leadership that believes in multilateralism. And I believe that in its finest moments, the United States contributed extremely importantly to multilateralism. I think on this 75th anniversary of the United Nations, we should remember that America's greatest ever president, Franklin Roosevelt, was the political mover and in many ways the political intellectual father of the United Nations as a concept and as a reality. And I believe that the UN Charter and its moral charter, the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948, which Eleanor Roosevelt uh, did more than any other person to bring to reality, are the two great foundations of multilateralism. Uh, there are many people, including myself, that are deeply steeped in that multilateralism. I have spent the last 20 years nonstop working for and with the United Nations and believe profoundly in the UN as a system for peace and for sustainable development and for human rights, and believe on its 75th anniversary, we should rededicate ourselves, especially this generation, to those purposes. So this is why I say this is not uh, beyond hope. It's on the contrary, there is a great part of American intellectual life which sees multilateralism as its core principle. And many of us have fought from the Vietnam War to the wars of the Middle East wholeheartedly and vociferously within our own country, and will continue to champion the UN Charter as the framework for preserving peace. And so I just want to be very clear about that. It's far from hopeless. It is a practical challenge. Some people have been writing in the chat room that I don't, you know, that I'm being stupid because it's all the U.S. military industrial complex and so on, or I'm somehow belittling listeners by making it over personalistic. I'm not. I've been involved in these issues for 40 years and as a U.S. Citizen for a lot longer than that. I am not oversimplifying, and it's not so simple as the U.S. military industrial complex. It's not so simple as Trump. It is a struggle at all times in changing circumstances to try to hone to a sane, smart, objective course. And that's what we need to do in a new context in 2020.
Is there a danger of Cold War escalating into a hot war? And that was a question that's come from Australia. So, Professor Sachs?
There's always a danger of a hot war. And this is the most important thing to realize. Events can get out of control. We're living in a complex environment with complex systems, where the systems themselves are so complex they're sometimes not understood. The issues do not necessarily come down to decisions by leaders. Terrible blunders, mistakes, accidents can happen. And that's why we have to tone down the rhetoric and tone up the institutionalization of cooperation at all levels. The world came within a second or two of destruction in October 1962 in the Cuban Missile Crisis. It was one naval officer countermanding the order of another captain of a Soviet submarine that stopped the launch of a 15 kiloton nuclear torpedo that most likely would have set off complete global destruction. Neither Kennedy nor Khrushchev wanted that destruction. They were trying to back off, but actions taken through a series of accidents in the Caribbean, in anti-submarine and submarine warfare by local naval personnel who were not obeying orders, nearly set off thermonuclear war. Everybody should study this reality to understand it. We don't want to live by a tripwire. There are thousands of nuclear warheads, and between China and the United States, we can destroy everything. And these are not fully controlled, rational systems where you can breathe and sleep easily. These are systems that need de-escalation and control. So when you have someone as stupid as Trump, and he is stupid, and he's dangerous, and he's loudmouthed, and he's ignorant, it makes a difference, believe me, because it triggers all sorts of behavior all through bureaucracies, through the public, and so on. And don't misunderstand, that's why this is not a game. That's why Cold Wars are not cold necessarily, even if the leaders want them to be just rhetorical. Terrible things can happen. And so we shouldn't be playing around with this. And the point is that for relations as complex as the issues we're talking about right now on connectivity, online battlefields, autonomous weapons, cyber warfare, plus all of the other issues of a pandemic and all the rest, we need deep institutionalized engagement between countries, not rattling, not tweets and not even, trying to round up allies. It's so stupid what Pompeo is doing right now, traveling around Asia, trying to create an anti-China front. This is mind-bogglingly stupid. We need to talk to each other in detail about the realities that we're facing right now, and please to understand that things can escalate even when no one wants them to escalate. That's the whole history of the last century and a half, how accidents can happen and how things can get out of hand. I think this issue of decoupling is probably most relevant in the digital area, all of the relevant digital technologies, whether it's connectivity, computation, artificial intelligence, and so on. And so we should perhaps focus on that for a moment. First, the value of having global standards in the digital area is proved over the last 50 years. By having global standards, we've greatly accelerated the technological progress and the interoperability, the connectivity, the economies of scale and scope of the digital era. So the idea of creating a decoupled digital world of different camps or lack of interoperability would be an extremely high cost mistake. Now, we don't have full, obviously full connectivity because lots of applications are blocked within China. Lots of applications are increasingly blocked within the United States. And therefore, when the US now advances further attempts to impede China's access to advanced microprocessor chips, for example, there's a kind of fertile ground on which that's taking place. I'm against it because I think it is dangerous, invidious, not by any means the appropriate response to the circumstances, but and mainly I don't want to see our most important sphere of technological advance that can do so much to improve humankind, save the environment, help on health and education and governance and countless other areas, become militarized, divided, and subject to a very divisive Cold War mentality. Now, having said that, we are going to enter more industrial policy by region, almost surely, because every major region will want capacity in various technologies that are near the cutting edge. And so China has industrial policies, the US has industrial policies, Europe will have industrial policies, and that will be part of the lay of the land in this fast changing digital process. But we ought to have guardrails, understanding, updated rules of the game within the WTO on this new, dramatically dynamic and disruptive area of economic activity. This is the second point that I would say. Yes, there will be industrial policy of major regions. I have no doubt about it. But let's have it under the rules so that we don't lose the benefits of global standards and global interoperability and global connectedness. Then finally, on the issue of blocks, to a huge extent, China needs to be very proactive in preventing this also. Now, again, despite what some people are saying in the chat room about my naivete, you're open to your claims, but I think there will be a big difference with Trump out of office. Of course, I'm going to be engaged in my own struggles in that case to help make a more progressive and multilateral view within any administration that comes to power, because nothing's simple ever. We will have fights ahead and arguments ahead. But in any event, Trump actually made a lot of progress in getting other countries to buy into this US hard line. Just yesterday, Italy, of all countries, part of the Belt and Road Initiative, said we're not going to have Huawei in the system. And there are many reasons for this. These countries are dependent on the US militarily. They're afraid of the US, but they also need more assurance from China. A lot of China's neighbors are just afraid merely of the fact that China's a giant compared to the neighbors. And so there is a sense, my God, where is our security? And so China as a giant, as a superpower, needs also to build constantly that confidence of other countries as well. It goes with the territory. And I think I'm a big believer, for example, in RCEP, RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which is currently 15 countries, the 10 ASEAN countries, plus China, Japan, Korea, plus Australia, New Zealand. I think China should very proactively promote RCEP as a diplomatic venture to build confidence within the Asia-Pacific region, because China needs to build confidence also. It's a powerhouse, irrespective of the US. Put aside the whole US question, just China's relations with other countries. China needs to build that kind of confidence. So I think that this will be an ongoing issue, but the bottom line is decoupling is possible, but profoundly unadvisable. And we need to, therefore, establish proper rules for a new technological age, which is not the rules of WTO 1994.
Yes, thank you very much. Now, we have so many questions. I do want to give our two speakers the opportunity to make some concluding remarks. So what I'll do is I'll just mention just a few of the other questions that have been sent in, and then I'll invite each to give their final remarks. So we've talked a bit about the US presidential election. What is the significance of the US presidential election for US-China relations? And what do US and Chinese governments need to do in order to reverse the drive towards confrontation? Perhaps we've covered these, but maybe you might want to say more. And there's a question on the pandemic. To what extent has the pandemic affected US-China relations? And there's an interesting one as well. In what ways is the rest of the world affected by deteriorating US-China relations? And what role can other countries play in helping to improve the situation? That's a question from the Philippines, interestingly. So please, our two speakers, if you wish to respond to any other points that have been raised during the course of the discussion, or you want to address any of those questions, or you just want to make some final comments, can I ask you to do so? So can we go with Professor Sachs, please, first?
Great. Well, first to say thank you for a wonderful discussion and for organizing this, and for participants from all over the world. I'm most appreciative. We need to end the pandemic urgently. China has shown that you can suppress the pandemic successfully. Other countries in the Asia Pacific similarly have shown this is possible. The US, Europe, and Latin America need really to learn some lessons from this because it has been running out of control because of poor leadership and poor techniques of public health management. 2021 could be, I'm hoping it will be, a very constructive year, moving past the pandemic, getting it under control with, I hope, new vaccines that come online, but then several important global events in 2021. COP15 on the Convention on Biological Diversity, COP26 on the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Climate Agreement, a World Food Summit. I would think that the best way to encourage what we're both calling for is to work together in a highly professional and systematic way towards the success of those multilateral objectives. Because by working together on a goal-based way, we can establish all of the win-win opportunities that both of us see as so important. Thank you very much for the chance to join today.